It's a pleasure to be with you, dear brothers and sisters, once again. And I won't take too much of your time, just go through one or two hadith, inshallah. And these hadith help to formulate how to construct one's lifestyle and what one's mental framework has to be in life in general. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in one hadith has said, Ayyuhan nas, O people, inna akhwafa ma akhafu alaykum ithnan. That the most scariest thing which I fear for you are two things. I'm sure you've heard this hadith before, but maybe with another interpretation. So the Imam is saying, there are two things which I fear most for you people. Ittiba'ul hawa, following one's whims, hawaya nafs, one's whims, lust. Wa tulul amal, amal with a hamza, not with a ayn. And lengthy desires, extended wishes. These two I fear most. فَأَمَّا اتِّبَاءُ الْهَوَىٰ, in relation to following one's whims, فَيَسُدُّ عَنِ الْحَقِّ, it blocks one from the truth. When you follow your ego and your lusts and whims. أَمَّا طُولُ الْأَمَالِ, but in relation to the extended desires, lengthy wishes, فَيُنْسَى الْآخِرَةِ, it will make you forget the hereafter. And the hadith ends here. These two concepts I want to just try and open up to some degree and make them practical in our lifestyle. So ittiba'ul hawa is when you're inclined to that which the ego desires. Whatever your ego wants, whatever the nafsul ammara wants, you go towards it. It may even be salat, but the ego wants the salat. It's possible. The ego wants to fast. The nafsul ammara may want to fast. Sometimes the nafsul ammara wants to do prayers. But those prayers and those fasts will be deficient. But when you're at that level, that's a natural consequence. But in general, the whims, the lusts, whatever the ego wants, one is inclined towards it. Whenever there's a change in direction, they will also change. They will pray one day, they won't pray another day. They will fast 1 month, they won't fast another month. They keep on changing. There's no constancy. And as I said, even in relation to rituals, when the ego is inclined towards salat and fasting and other ibadat, there's going to be side effects. For example, someone who is used to praying on the first row of salat, and then one day they come late and there's no room for them. And they get disappointed and want to push someone the other side. That person is in the level of nafsul ammara. And all this time their ego has taken them to do prayers. That prayer is very limited. Or some people, they acquire haram money, like riba and other similar haram things. With that money they go to Hajj. The ego is taking them to Hajj. This is ittiba'ul hawa, following their whims. But here their whims are ibadat. And therefore when ibadat is in the category of someone's whims and lusts, that ibadat has no value, has very limited value. You see? Or someone is used to invite everyone on the 21st of Ramadan every year. One year it can't happen. They get disappointed. See, it's all the ego working. They're still at the level of nafsul ammara. At that level, whatever you do is going to be limited. Then the Imam said, you're going to be blocked from the truth when you follow your whims and your lusts. The Imam got this from the Holy Quran. In chapter 20, verses 15 and 16, Inna sa'ata atiyatun akadu ukhfiha litujza kullu nafsin bima tas'a. That verily the hour, the end of time, the Qiyamah is approaching or is coming. Not is coming in the future or anything. Right now it's coming, moment to moment. But Allah has concealed it. Otherwise right now, Qiyamah, everyone is in their Qiyamah. Because the hereafter is a function of your soul. Alhamdulillah, with Falah, I've come here many times. You should all be wary of these concepts by now. I don't want to now keep on repeating. But heaven and hell, hereafter, is a function of your soul, your immaterial soul. Moment to moment, it's happening. You're building your heaven or hell. But Allah has kept it hidden. It hasn't manifested before you yet. It starts manifesting when you die a physical death. But it didn't start from physical death. It starts manifesting after physical death. And Allah's concealed it, and it's in order to recompense every soul for that which it has striven towards, that which it has endeavored towards. And then the next verse says, فَلَا يَسُدَّنَّكَ فِيهَا مَنْ لَا يُؤْمِنُ بِهَا وَاتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ فَتَرْدَى. Now, one way of translating this verse, this is the following verse, chapter 20, verse 16, saying, don't let those who don't have iman biha. Biha, saying, don't have iman in relation to resurrection, as-sa'a. And as a result, they follow wattaba'a hawahu. They follow their whims and lusts as a result of them not believing in Qiyamah, fatarada, and they will fall. They will spiritually depress themselves. The verse is saying, don't let these people bar you, divert you, prevent you from the hour, from resurrection. Don't let them prevent you from this reality. They don't believe in it, but don't let them make you not believe in it. And this is how they usually translate it, and that's okay. But there's another way one can look at this verse, and it's on a par with Arabic grammar. Here, the pronoun la yu'minu biha, or fala yasuddannaka anha, goes back to resurrection, because the previous verse said that verily resurrection is coming, and so they revert these pronouns to resurrection. But there's another place you can revert this noun, the pronoun, and it's closer to the pronoun than resurrection. Resurrection is further out, and that is the nafs. لِتُجْزَى كُلُّ نَفْسٍ. And so the meaning would be this, that don't let those who don't believe in the soul, in the nafs, and as a result of not believing in the nafs, they follow their whims, and they're going to fall. Don't let them bar you, prevent you from the nafs. This is another way to look at the verse. And either way, the meaning is the same, because the hereafter is a function of the soul. Whatever you incorporate in your soul, that is the hereafter. In chapter 36, Surah Yasin, I can't remember the verse, it says, "La tujzawna illa ma kuntum ta'malun." You won't be recompensed save that which you did. Which means jaza, recompensation, is the action itself. Heaven and hell and actions, it's one reality. The action we do with our limbs and everything. Heaven and hell is something immaterial. What is the link here? It all depends on the intentions behind those actions. Otherwise, the actions, two people doing salat, it looks the same. The intentions are immaterial. So heaven and hell is a function of your intentions. What is the soul intending moment to moment? So here, the first point, or the first half of this hadith is saying, don't follow your ego, your nafsul ammara. Don't let your animal side dominate over your spiritual side. Because if that happens, you're going to follow the whims and lusts, and it's going to take you away from believing in the hereafter and focusing on yourself. It'll divert you from yourself. Following your whims and lusts diverts you from your soul, yourself. That's something within. But you're focused on something outside you, of a haram nature, or of a futile nature. So, what is the solution here? How can we prevent ourselves or cure ourselves from not following the whims of the dunya and the lusts and the futile things and so on and so forth? The answer is that khulus. You have to purify and make sincere your actions. How? Instead of doing whatever you want and letting go of yourself, never do anything because you want to. Whatever you do, see, does Allah say it's wajib? Does Allah say it's mustahab? Does Allah say it's good? The minimum is, does Allah say it's mubah? But if Allah says it's haram, it's futile, makruh, and refrain from it. So every action you do, your intention to get sincerity and to free yourself from just doing whatever you want is this action. Filter it out and say, is this on a par with Allah's orders? With every action that you do? Or is it on a par with my ego? And in the beginning it's very difficult, because if you're truthful to yourself, many things you're doing and none of it's for Allah, even though it's not haram. That's only one step, filtering out your actions to make sure it's not haram. But a higher step is filtering out your actions to see if it's on a par with Allah's satisfaction. This is khulus. So with whatever you do, the intention should be, so look, you're tuning your intentions. The intention should be that I want to do that which is on a par with Allah's satisfaction. The more you do this, the more you're distancing this idea of following the whims of the soul. Because now you're following only that which is on a par with Allah's Sharia. You're following only that which is on a par with Allah's tariqah. And as long as you're growing, that's good. And the following of the whims becomes less and less. So that is the first half of the hadith. Then the second half was tulul amal, extended desires, very lengthy desires that one has. And this has many applications. One application is, for example, that someone doesn't have the means to buy a 200 square meter house, for example. Their means is a 50 square meter house. But they wish to get another much bigger house. And it may take a number of years, but they're planning. Or they can't get a very good car, but they wish for that very good car. You see? That which they can get is X car, but they're looking for 10X. Or things which aren't even within your capacity. I want to be alive for 120 years, for example. I mean, things which are very unlikely you're wishing for. Now we have to get to the reason of why this is problematic for the soul. I'll come to that in a minute. Or it may be a car, a house, a title, a position. For example, you'll be surprised, many seminary students, I wish I become a marja, or I wish I become a mujtahid. And then you have to work for 20, 30 years, but right now they're making the wish. This wishing something which is 20, 30 years ahead, I mean, it's futile. And it has problems. We'll come to it. Allah says to Nabi Musa, Ya Musa, la yatulu fit dunya amaluk. Don't extend your desires. Don't desire something on an extended time scale in this world. فَيَقْسُوَ لِذَلِكَ قَلْبُكَ. Because if you do, your heart will become hardened. You'll become stone-hearted. وَقَاسِيَ الْقَلْبِ مِنِّي بَعِيدٌ. And the stone-hearted people, they're distant from me, Allah. Now, what is the rationale behind this? With lengthy, extended desires, the focus is on outside the soul. The car, the house, the certificate, a position. Your focus is outside your soul on these kind of things, rather than inside the soul. And when you focus externally and desire things external to you, you forget your interior aspect. And what was your interior aspect? We said the hereafter is a function of your soul. The hereafter is a function of your soul. Lengthy desires facilitate you focusing outside your soul. When you focus outside your soul, you become oblivious to your soul. The Quran says, "Alaykum anfusakum." Focus on yourselves. Don't be oblivious to your batin, to your inside. And the reason you shouldn't be oblivious to your inside is because heaven and hell is a function of your inside. What have you incorporated within you? But the operative word is lengthy desires. Sometimes you have to plan something and it's rational, but don't desire it. When you desire it, it's a fall. Planning it, no, someone is working, it's their job. They're earning money to provide for the family, and they have to plan. That's okay. When they desire or wish for it, that's when they're forgetting themselves. That's where the rationale, the key, the crux of the matter is. You shouldn't be preoccupied with it. Now, we have some ahadith which show this more. The Holy Messenger has said, إِذَا أَصْبَحْتَ فَلَا تُحَدِّثْ نَفْسَكَ بِالْمَسَاءِ. When it's during the day, when it's daytime and you enter the day, you've woken up, for example, don't remind your nafs of what's to happen at night. And also the other way around. وَإِذَا أَمْسَيْتَ فَلَا تُحَدِّثْ نَفْسَكَ بِالصَّبَاحِ. When it's night, don't remind your nafs what's to happen in the morning, the following morning. And even we have stories where very noble companions, they bought something through nisya, a delayed payment. You know, when you get the thing, but you pay it in installments. For example, the computer is £100. They give you the computer on day one, and they say you pay £20 every month. One of the companions made a transaction like this, and it was a 1 month delayed payment. The Prophet said, I'm surprised why this companion is doing this. Because the companion desired that transaction. He said, I'm surprised, why did he make such a transaction for 1 month? Because if the desire element was taken away, he wouldn't have made the transaction. Focus on the inside. And everything in the Sharia, from the ibadat, even the non-ibadat, the socio-political actions within the Sharia, like fighting for justice or the judiciary that we have, and a reconciliation between different parties, and all these socio-political things, the ultimate rationale in all of them is for you to focus on your nafs. That's the end goal for all of them. You shouldn't get preoccupied with them. Even salat. You do salatul layl, for example, to get more sustenance from Allah. And then after a period of time, you see that the sustenance is coming. Then you desire salatul layl. And then you say, oh, it's coming at night and I'm waiting for it, I'm desiring it. Then you see Salatul Layl as the cause for the increase in sustenance. Look, slowly you're forgetting Allah. Salatul Layl becomes the goal, not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salatul Layl becomes an instrument, a means. So, in relation to that which is outside you, you have to not desire it for an extended period of time. Now, for some people, extended may be a number of years, for some people, a number of months, for some, a number of weeks, for some, a number of days, for some, before the blinking of an eye. or before breathing out, they never desire anything. Moment to moment, they're just focused, they do their duty, but they're focusing on their self. Because it's that focus on the self which creates that heaven for them. But when they focus outside themselves, they will forget the hereafter. Especially when the desire factor comes in. Yes. In another hadith, Man shaghala nafsahu bighayri nafsihi, one who's preoccupied with his soul, preoccupies his soul, his self, bighayri nafsihi, with other than his soul, meaning outside the soul. They'll be bewildered in darkness. They'll be bewildered in the dunya. And so one has to, since the essence of what we are, the very fabric of what we are, is an immaterial reality. And our actions and knowledge, which comes from our intentions, are immaterial. We have to make sure how we are incorporating and what we're incorporating into ourselves. Before being preoccupied outside yourself, whatever you want to do, the focus always has to be inside. Very delicate point. It's a bit difficult to start because it goes against a lot of the ways of thinking that we've been brought up with. Yes, but this is true Islam. As I said, not only with ibadat, even outside ibadat. For example, you're going on a march against, for example, the genocide of Israel, or in support of the Palestinians, against occupation, against ethnic cleansing, all these things. You go on a march, protests, demonstrations, which I think is very important, to go on the streets and protest to that degree which they allow you. Just because the law here says it's illegal, it doesn't mean you can't do it. You're doing it for Allah's sake. The problem of not doing it is that it's a silence which is contaminating you. And if you say, no, it's the letter of it's the rule of the land, and our Marajas say you shouldn't go against the rule of the land, I will say, okay, the Maraja says it, it's very good. But when the rule of the land is contaminating you, and the Maraja has given the green light, naturally the Maraja would then tell you to compensate for this contamination of your decision to live in such a land. Are you doing that? And compensating is much more difficult. So sometimes doing illegal things in a given country, stealing, cheating, that's haram. Be it from a Muslim or from a non-Muslim. That is wrong. These are things which Islam didn't bring, even before Islam. These things, all people had this, all civilizations had this. But not allowing you to go on a protest, where has this come from? These kind of illegalities, don't submit to it quickly. There are some things which are illegal, we accept. You can't con the system in your countries, even though they're not non-Muslim, and steal and cheat and do different things. But there are some things where the illegality is under question. They're doing it for their own greed and best interests of the... When they tell you not to steal, it's illegal, we accept it. It's a wrong thing to do. But when they say don't wave the Palestinian flag or don't have protests for the Palestinians, that's their... It's out of greed they're saying this. They want to work in the best interest of themselves, not for the nation. And you can all start doing it. And if they start taking you into prison, then we have to think of something else. But if you want to escape and flee from this responsibility, well, either you have to migrate, but if you want to stay here, you have to think of compensating, and compensating is not easy. So that was one hadith. Oh, yeah, the point was this, though. I kind of diverted in the Palestinian issue. So even when you go on these marches, sometimes you have to be careful that the march doesn't become a Marxist march. 99% of the marches and protests that Muslims do are just like what Marxists do. There's no difference. Unfortunately, a percentage of the marches that we have throughout the world, in Europe, American, and sometimes they're headed by scholars. It's even worse than the Marxist marches. It's even worse. It's even of a lower level than how Marxists execute demonstrations. I don't want to expand too much on this because I've explained it elsewhere. The marches have to emanate from Tawheed and from a Tawheedi worldview. And it's this that you have to focus on. That you are Khalifatullah, and now your focus in this march, which is a very active, busy preoccupation with marches of thousands of people, but you're focusing on incorporating the attributes of justice of Allah within you. That's where the focus is. Not outside you and intermingling with friends and, oh, we've done this and everything, and then planning different things. It shouldn't be at the cost of attentiveness to your inside. Okay, that's one hadith. There's another hadith where Allah says to one of the prophets of Bani Israel, "In ahbabta an talqani ghadan fi khatirat al-Quds." If you like to meet me, Allah is saying this. If you want to meet me, Allah, on the day of resurrection, in the forbidden sanctuary, in a sanctuary which is forbidden to people, except for the purified ones. لا يمسوا إلا المطهرون. If you want to meet me, Allah, in the forbidden sanctuary where only the purified ones can enter, then He gives a number of attributes you have to acquire. Fakun, therefore be, fit dunya, in the dunya, be wahidan, be alone. Be alone in the dunya. Not be in the house and all alone. But do all your duties. Some duties are individual, some are social, political, congregational. But whatever you're doing duty-wise, be alone. You're focusing on yourself. You're not focusing outside yourself. So, fakun fi dunya, be in the dunya, wahidan, be alone. Ghariban, be isolated. Spiritually isolated, not physically isolated. But even today, someone can be at home all day, but they may be surfing the internet and they may see, hear, read a lot of rubbish. That person isn't spiritually isolated. They're exiting their souls, their selves. They're still focusing on outside themselves. In spiritual terms, they're neither alone nor isolated. They're drowned in the multiplicities of the dunya. But you have to focus on the soul. Moment to moment, how are you What are you doing to your soul? You're building your hereafter, moment to moment. These duties that we have in the Sharia and the Tariqah are all for this aim. We are individual beings, not social animals. Mahmuman, mahzuna. Be in the dunya in a state of sorrow and grief. Not in a state of sorrow and grief for the dunya. You should never have sorrow or grief if you lose something or you don't attain something in the dunya, but rather sorrow and grief that you're not in the forbidden sanctuary. You're not one of the purified ones. That you're distanced from Allah. This should always make you saddened. But this kind of saddening is a spiritual sorrow and grief, which is good. And with this spiritual sorrow and grief, it helps you focus less on outside yourself and be attentive to your inside. Mustawhishan minan nas. Be indifferent to the people. Don't be acquainted with the people. Don't acquire an affinity with the people. Your affinity is only with your inside. And what are you doing it with it? Yes, there are some people who, when you talk with them, they remind you of Allah. They remind you to be attentive to the hereafter. That's okay. Because it's still in line with being attentive to your inside. But assemblies where there's talk of the dunya, for the sake of the dunya. Sometimes there's talk of an orphanage. We want to build an orphanage. And if we do it, these benefits will come. And the benefits are worldly. That is also oblivious to oneself. But sometimes there may be an orphanage and you're discussing it in an assembly, but moment to moment as you're discussing it, you're only doing it for Allah's sake. And if you feel that people are doing it for unreasonable incentives, you may leave because you don't want to be involved in anything which can contaminate oneself. So be in the dunya alone, isolated, in a state of sorrow and grief, becoming acquainted with the people or acquiring an affinity with the people. بِمَنْزِلَةِ like, and he gives an analogy here. بِمَنْزِلَةِ الطَّيْرِ الْوَاحِدِ الَّذِي يَطِيرُ فِي الْأَرْضِ الْغِفَاظِ. Like an isolated bird who's flying over, land, like barren land. وَيَأْكُلُ مِنْ رُؤُوسِ الْأَشْجَارِ. And this isolated bird only consumes from the tips of the trees. Doesn't go down with the other birds to consume from the leaves and other things. وَيَشْرَبُ مِنْ مَاءِ الْعُيُونِ. Only drinks from the water of the springs. فَإِذَا كَانَ اللَّيْلِ. And when it's nighttime, أَوَى وَحْدَهُ. They seek refuge alone. وَلَمْ يَأْوَ مَعَ الطُّيُورِ. They don't seek refuge with the other birds. They're isolated. إِسْتَأْنَسَ بِرَبِّهِ. And then this lonely, isolated bird acquires affinity and acquaintance, uns, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with their Lord. وَإِسْتَوْحَشَ مِنَ الطُّيُورِ. And they distance themselves, isolate themselves from the other birds. Be like that isolated bird in a flock. They're with the flock, but they're also isolated from them. You have to be with the people, but spiritually isolated from them. And one's lifestyle, when you want to formulate your lifestyle, these principles have to be endeavored to practice to the best of one's capacity, and as long as one is improving, week after week, month after month, that's good. But you have to self-scrutinize yourself, account for yourself, to see, are you getting better in this regard or not? But action to action, the monitoring of yourself. How are you building your hereafter? Okay, wa sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala tahirin.